Before we drag ourselves into the vid, do me a mercy and leave a thumbs up. Throw in a subscription. Maybe hit that hype button if the machine spirits allow it. And in the comments, tell me what kind of miserable job you think you'd survive in the Imperium. Thanks. I guess.
In the grim darkness of the far future, even a regular day job can be a death sentence. Think your 9 to 5 is tough? The average Imperial citizen would love to trade places. While Space Marines and Inquisitors get the spotlight, countless ordinary humans toil in obscurity at jobs so horrifying they'd make a chaos cultist flinch. From the depths of Hive City sewers to the void of space, these are the most nightmarish menial jobs the 41st millennium has to offer. Grab your flak vest, or what's left of it, and a strong stomach. We're about to explore the worst occupations a peasant can have in Warhammer 40,000. After this, filing paperwork at the office will sound like a vacation. Welcome to a world where going to work might be the last thing you ever do. Underhive Vermin Exterminator. Imagine being the unlucky soul tasked with pest control in a hive city's deepest, darkest pits. Exterminator sounds almost heroic until you realize your targets aren't ordinary rats. They're fist-sized mutant vermin, foot-long biting insects, and the occasional genes stealer lurking in the ducts. As an Underhive Vermin Exterminator, your workplace is the labyrinth of sewage tunnels, ventilation shafts, and collapsed sublevels far below the hab blocks. It's a realm of perpetual darkness and toxic decay, where the air is thick with chemical fumes and the skittering of unseen creatures. No armor, no problem. Forget decent equipment. That's for Imperial Guard. You're sent down in nothing but threadbare coveralls, a dim, flickering lamp, and maybe a rusty pipe or a single-shot hand flamer. The policy on protective gear? Cost prohibitive, says the administratum. So as you wade knee-deep in filth, your only line of defense against plague-ridden rats or acid-spitting roaches is a rag over your mouth and sheer luck. Every scrabbling sound in the dark makes your heart skip, because you know you're not the top predator down here. You're the prey that brings its own light. Vermin of unusual size. The creatures in the Underhive put any natural ecosystem to shame. There are bloated sump rats the size of small dogs, their bodies warped by generations of industrial runoff. Packs of them swarm out of pipe holes, red eyes gleaming, incisors ready to gnaw through steel cables, or your leg. If it's not rats, it's cockroach things with barbed shells, or fist-sized venomous millipedes that drop from ceiling cracks. Now and then you might stumble on evidence that something far worse has made its nest in the tunnels. Scrapes on the walls 3 meters up, or a half-eaten human corpse dragged into a maintenance hatch. Pray it's just the work of a feral mutie, or maybe an ambul, a burrowing Xenos beast, and not a genes stealer cult's handiwork. Because if it's genes stealers infesting the underlevels, you'll never see retirement or daylight again. Every day is a horror movie. Your job is basically to crawl into places so awful that even the gangers won't go there, armed with a flashlight and a pole, and flush out whatever's chewing the power cables this week. One day, you're torching a nest of razor-winged bats that have been feasting on cadavers in an old sump. The next, you're squeezing through a half-collapsed duct, trying not to gag from the stench of rot, when you realize the mold on the walls is moving. Pro tip, it might be an icrotic slime, and it's definitely carnivorous. The lucky days are when you only have to deal with bitey things, not the things that want to lay eggs in you or worse. Human hazards too. It's not just monsters and mutants. The Underhive is crawling with desperate folks who won't hesitate to rob or kill an unarmored loner. Rival scavengers, Underhive gangs, even corpse-worshipping cults use these tunnels. They see you carrying a light and some tools, and figure you might have food or ammo. You're as likely to catch a knife between the ribs from a starving sump scavenger as you are to catch a disease from the toxic sludge. And Emperor forbid you interrupt a gang's secret route or a chaos cult ritual down in the dark. Exterminators go missing down here, and it's not because the time clock malfunctioned. Surprise. Bonus. Demons. Occasionally, the hive's bowels cough up something truly nightmarish. Maybe it's because some fool in the spire was dabbling in forbidden rituals, and all that evil drips down to the Underhive. Maybe a warp-tainted artifact got tossed down a drain. Whatever the reason, you might turn a corner and find a room lit with an unnatural glow, walls pulsing like organs, and realize you're not alone. How does a regular guy with a torch deal with a minor daemon manifesting in a maintenance tunnel? Short answer, he doesn't. If you're lucky, it kills you before doing anything really unspeakable. If you're unlucky, well, there are worse fates than death, and those tend to lurk in the warp. Why do it? You might wonder why anyone would sign up for this suicide mission. Maybe it's a penal work detail, volunteer, or get sent to the mines. Maybe it's hive citizens so poor that even this job is a step up from starving. Some have a vague hope of a promotion to slightly less lethal duties topside. Others simply have no choice. When the sump spiders start infesting the drinking water tanks, someone has to go down and deal with it, or the whole hive dies of poison. And in the Imperium, individual lives are cheap. Exterminators are given a heartfelt thanks, rarely, and a few throne gelt for hazard pay, very rarely. But mostly they get told to keep quiet about what they've seen down there. Panic isn't good for productivity in the hab blocks after all. At the end of each shift, if you survive, you drag yourself out of a hatch in some dingy sub-basement, covered in grime and bites, maybe carrying a sack of mutant rat tails as proof of extermination. The overseer might grunt that you did adequate and send you right back in with a fresh battery for your lamp. There's no glory, no recognition. The best you can hope for is that the next encounter in the dark ends quickly and painlessly. It's a far cry from the heroics of Space Marines, but it's the daily reality for those making a living by hunting the hive's most disgusting critters. And if you somehow survive long enough, you'll have stories that no one will believe. That is, if your wheezing lungs and scar-covered body don't speak for you first. Corpse-Starch Processor, Corpse Recycling Worker. On a hive world, even death offers no escape from labor or from becoming someone's next meal. As a corpse-starch processor, you clock in at the local corpse recycling factory, where the recently deceased of the hive, and not so recently if stocks run low, are the raw material for the only food most citizens ever get: corpse starch. Yes, that bland gray ration paste everyone eats in the lower levels is made of exactly what you think, and your job is to make it. Soylent green? More like Soylent gray. The factory floor is a vision of industrialized horror. Conveyor belts chug along carrying piles of cadavers, some fresh, many others bloated or half-decayed, into grinders the size of hab units. A tangle of pipes and vats surrounds you, gurgling with human liquefaction in progress. The air is thick with the stench of blood, lye, and rot. You can taste it with every breath, an irony not lost on you as you process what will eventually become nutrient bars for the masses. The output? A gooey, gray paste that will be dried into wafers or canned in tins. It's technically food, but you'd lose your appetite forever if you saw how it's made. Unfortunately, that's your daily nightmare. Dangers in the slurry. Working here makes the Underhive sewers smell like a flower garden. You're constantly wet, soaked in blood, chemical solvents, or both. Slippery floors claim a few workers each month. One misstep and you take a surprise dive into a vat of corpse sludge. No one hears from those poor souls again, but rumor is the efficiency ratings go up afterward. After all, nothing is wasted in this place. Then there are the diseases. When you're chopping up plague victims and mutant carcasses for hours on end, even the strongest inoculations might not save you from the cocktail of pathogens swirling around. Hive nobles might enjoy immunity boosters and rebreathers. You have a threadbare mask that does absolutely nothing when a burst of corpse gas from a decomposed body hits you in the face. The Inquisition is watching. As if the everyday grossness weren't enough, you live under the constant shadow of the Holy Inquisition. Why would the Inquisition care about a corpse factory? Because it's all too easy for heresy to take root here. Think about it. You handle thousands of human remains, and maybe one day something in the mix doesn't add up. Perhaps the body of a mutant or Xenos finds its way into the grinder, whether by accident or someone's twisted idea of sabotage. If the texture or nutritional readings of the Corpse-Starch batch are off, alarms sound and everything halts. If the processed food looks even a tad too green or too stringy, management whispers about contamination. Next thing you know, a black-clad Inquisitor and a retinue of gun-wielding zealots show up unannounced. When that happens, the whole factory floor freezes. You thought your supervisor was scary. Try an inquisitorial acolyte interrogating you under bright lights about why batch number 3891 had a deviant protein composition. The slightest hint that you or your co-workers knowingly mixed heretical material into the food, and you'll be joining the next batch of special supplements, personally. More likely, they'll just assume corruption and cleanse the entire facility with flamers. In short, if a corpse-starch worker spots anything anomalous, an extra limb on a body, strange symbols carved into flesh, or Emperor forbid, a twitch on a supposedly dead psyker, you hit the emergency stop and pray. Because if you miss it, you might doom everyone. And if you report it, you might still get executed for caution's sake. It's a lose-lose, as most things are in the Imperium. A symphony of horror. The work itself is unrelenting. At your station, you might operate a bone grinder crank, feeding limbs into crunching gears all day. The sound of bones and sinew being pulverized becomes the music of your life. Across the aisle, someone is in charge of the fat-rendering vats, skimming off human tallow, some of which will end up in those ubiquitous Imperium candles. Nothing goes to waste. Another poor sap handles the hair and teeth filtration, a miserable job that involves clearing clogs of hair from filters and shoveling out buckets of teeth that clatter down sorting chutes. Where do the teeth go? You don't want to know, but chances are some get recycled into last gun polishing grit or something equally absurd. Conversations on the line are as morbid as you'd expect. Gallows humor is all that keeps you sane. Hey, think this one knew he'd be lunch? One worker might quip, hoisting a cadaver. Better him than me, another replies, chuckling darkly as they hose down a blood-slick floor. You laugh because the alternative is screaming. New hires often do scream or vomit on their first day. That's why veterans always stand a few paces back until the rookie either acclimates or quits. Quitting, of course, isn't really an option in a hive where every able body is assigned a role. Strict rations and stricter rules. The final product, corpse-starch paste, gets packed into ration bricks. It's odorless, tasteless, and ubiquitous. You'd think after all this you wouldn't want to touch the stuff, but ironically, it's also part of your payment. Workers might get a free tin of the same corpse starch to take home. Bon appetit, just try not to think about who it might have been yesterday. Complaining about it is not advised. In some places, simply expressing disgust at the taste of corpse starch is considered sedition, a thought crime against the Imperium's resourcefulness. If your supervisor hears you gag and gripe, you could find yourself reassigned to a penal legion for re-education. It's happened before. The logic goes, if you're not grateful for your corpse paste, maybe you'd prefer to be on the menu instead. The bright side: efficiency and loyalty are occasionally rewarded. Survive long enough at the factory, assuming the chemicals haven't given you organ failure or the Inquisition hasn't purged the place, and you might move up to a slightly less nauseating role, like paperwork, tallying input versus output. Some workers take grim pride in their job, telling themselves they provide a vital service. In a way, they do. Without corpse starch, billions would starve. Serving the Emperor in death is quite literal here. Every corpse rendered is one more meal for the hive. It's practically virtuous if you squint past the gore. That thought helps some sleep at night. Others just collapse into nightmare-plagued unconsciousness, only to rise and do it all again tomorrow. Working as a Corpse-Starch Processor is a daily test of stomach and sanity. It's hard to imagine a worse day job, and yet, in the 41st millennium, there are far worse fates. Whenever you think you've seen the worst humanity has to offer, another conveyor belt rolls in with something even more appalling. And so you keep your head down, keep the machines running, and try not to become part of the product yourself. After all, in this economy, you are what you eat, and vice versa. Toxic waste scrapper. Forge World trash scavenger. If you've ever complained about taking out the garbage, spare a thought for the men and women who spend their entire lives wading through oceans of toxic sludge on Imperial Forge worlds and hives. As a toxic waste scrapper, your job description is simple: sort and salvage the detritus of a planet-sized factory. In practice, that means being up to your armpits in radioactive ooze, corrosive chemicals, and heavy metals that make Chernobyl look like a petting zoo. All day, every day. A sea of acid. Picture the landscape. Under a permanent smog-choked sky, there's a lake, no, an entire sea, of bubbling industrial waste stretching to the horizon. Decades or centuries of unfiltered runoff from manufactorums have pooled into toxic lagoons. The color? An ever-changing rainbow of neon green, sickly yellow, and ominous black, depending on which factory dumped what that week. This water can dissolve organic matter in minutes, so naturally you and your fellow scrappers must venture out onto it on rusted metal boats or makeshift rafts, poking at floating junk with pikes. The smell alone could knock a grox dead, a mix of sulfur, burnt plastic, and something sharply metallic that clings to your sinuses. Your gear is minimal and mostly second-hand. An ill-fitting rubberized suit that's been patched more times than you can count and still leaks. A rebreather mask that only sometimes filters out the poisonous fumes. Other times you're coughing blood by end of shift. Thick gloves with holes in the fingers. For some reason, management draws the line at providing proper boots. Hope you don't mind your feet burning for the first hour each day until they go numb. And then there's your trusty pole with a hook for fishing out treasures from the sludge. Treasure in trash. Believe it or not, there's value in this filth. Broken machinery, discarded weapon casings, spent fuel canisters, all can be melted down and reused. Your job is to sift out anything solid enough to be worth recycling. So you trudge along the shoreline or push your raft through the muck, snagging whatever looks semi-intact. A tangle of cabling here, a cracked cogitator there. Sometimes it's like an Easter egg hunt, except the eggs are toxic and the prize for finding them is not dying from your daily quota shortfall. The administratum wants X tons of salvage a week. If your crew falls behind, the overseers assume you're slacking and cut rations, as if anyone could be lazy in this hell. That means even on days when the acid rain is literally peeling the skin off your back, you'd better hit your numbers by dredging up that extra chunk of scrap. Environmental hazards everywhere. The environment itself is actively trying to kill you. Acid rain is a frequent occurrence. Clouds of chemical byproduct from the hive stacks condense and fall as sizzling droplets that eat into concrete and unprotected flesh alike. You'll feel a splat on your shoulder and see your suit start smoking, knowing that if one of those drops hits your exposed neck or cheek, it'll bore a hole before you can even yelp. Umbrellas. Try sheet metal panels rigged over common work areas, which help until they themselves corrode through. Then there's the air quality. Breathing Forge world air is like inhaling sandpaper, heavy with ash, metal particulates, and promethium fumes. Most scrappers develop the chronic cough within months, a racking, wet cough that never goes away. It's basically slow-motion lung death. No one lives to old age here. They just get weaker until one day they keel over, hack up something black, and that's that. Their body is unceremoniously tossed into the same waste they spent their life cleaning, and ironically becomes someone else's problem to fish out. Life on the floating junk continent. On some worlds, the waste accumulates into semi-solid masses, literally forming new land. Picture continents made of layered trash and congealed chemical sludge. Scrapper crews set up semi-permanent platforms or shanty towns on these heaps. You might spend your shift picking through a mountain of industrial byproducts that's slowly sinking into the caustic sea. Every step is a gamble. Will the crust hold or collapse and drop you into the acid below? Plenty of scrappers disappear with barely a sound this way. One wrong step and they're swallowed by the sludge, their cries smothered by bubbling toxic goop. And just because it's a trash heap doesn't mean nothing lives there. Oh yes, life finds a way, a grotesque, mutant way. In the depths of the waste ocean, things swim. Maybe they were once simple microorganisms that mutated, or some xeno-worm got imported in a container and thrived. You'll see ripples where nothing should move. Occasionally, a pale, eyeless eel-like thing will flop onto the surface, grown fat on chemical soup, gnashing teeth at anything nearby. Scavenger birds, or what passes for birds on a forge world, circle overhead, hairless, chemical-burned gulls that screech and dive to pick at whatever the acid hasn't dissolved, including you if you lie still too long. Every day, more of the same. The monotony is soul-crushing. You fill your salvage sack with whatever metal bits you scrounge, drag it to the weigh station, then collapse from exhaustion. A bell rings, a new shift starts. Day and night lose meaning under the permanent dark clouds. Recreation is non-existent. What would you even do? Go for a swim? The lucky scrappers might have a shack with a cot that isn't under a leak. The unlucky just sleep in their rubber suits on the ground, because touching the wrong puddle while you nap can mean waking up with half your face melted off. People in this job often cope by dulling their senses. There's a bootleg rot gut made from strained industrial alcohol that can blind you, but hey, you're breathing poison anyway, so who cares about a little more? Others turn to stims to keep going through the pain and fatigue until their hearts give out. And of course, there's the ever-present threat of radiation. Many waste sites are subtly radioactive, enough that after a year or two, you start noticing tumors in awkward places. The medici won't treat scrappers for that. What a waste of resources. They just slap an unfit-for-work stamp on you and, if you're fortunate, reassign you to a less lethal detail like serving as target practice for the PDF. If not, They toss you in with the trash to dispose of you the only way they know how. Inexplicably, hope. It's a peculiar thing, but some scrappers find a weird pride in what they do. They'll say, without us, the whole hive would choke on its own filth. That's actually true. The colossal foundries and forges produce unimaginable waste, and somebody has to clear it, or the hive would literally bury itself. Scrap crews are the unsung, unseen custodians preventing planetary ecological collapse. Well, a worse collapse than already exists. Of course, the nobles and tech priests will never acknowledge this. But among themselves, waist deep in glowing green sludge, scrappers might toast with a bottle of gut rot. To another day not dead. And when a scrapper does die, if there's anything left of the body, it might ironically get processed into corpse starch or rendered for tallow, feeding the hive or lighting a cathedral with the very flesh of a person who spent their life cleaning up everyone else's mess. In the grim calculus of the Imperium, it's an efficient cycle. But for the poor, toxic waste scrapper, each day is just another trial by acid, toxin, and flame, a far cry from any idea of human dignity. It's filthy, thankless, and lethal. In other words, just another job on a hive world. Munitorum munitions loader, ammo depot worker. Down in the bowels of an Imperial logistics base or a Navy storage yard, you slog through aisles of ammunition crates that stack higher than a hab block. As a Munitorum munitions loader, you handle the literal firepower of the Imperium. Billions of shells, las packs, promethium canisters, and every one of them is a potential bomb in your hands. It's tedious until it's terrifying, and usually it's both. All day with the bombs. Your work site might be a vast warehouse vault or a cavernous starship hold packed with ordnance. Each morning's shift begins with a data slate detailing the unimaginable quantity of munitions to be moved or sorted. You and your crew form human chains to haul heavy artillery shells the size of small children, to stack missiles one atop another, to load macro battery magazines with crane assistance when the crane isn't broken. Much of it is back-breaking manual labor. Automated cargo servitors exist, but there are never enough, and they malfunction half the time. So you're the forklift and conveyor belt combined. The ammo itself ranges from stubber rounds by the millions to tank-buster seismic charges. A single slip, dropping a crate of frags or jostling an unstable plasma warhead, can set off a chain reaction that vaporizes the whole depot. Everyone knows this. And yet, quotas must be met. Frontline transports must depart on schedule. So corners are cut and safety is a prayer rather than a practice. You've developed a habit of holding your breath anytime a coworker trips or a forklift servitor stutters, half expecting to be blown sky high each time. Ticking time bombs. The biggest threat is exactly what you think: accidental detonation. Your colleagues try to joke about it. If we go, we'll go out with a bang, eh? It's gallows humor because it's true. One spark in the promethium stock, one mislabeled pallet of crack grenades tumbling off a loader. And it won't be ha-ha funny. It'll be instant death for everyone in a 100-meter radius. Minor explosions happen with troubling frequency. You'll be eating your ration paste in the break nook and whoomp. A muffled blast rattles the facility. No one even panics unless the alarms start howling. A little bang might just mean a remote stack of munitions went up, along with a few unfortunates. The overseers note the loss in their ledgers and send you to clean the soot when it's safe. Of course, a major blast, say a hive quake knocking a pile of plasma warheads together, will kill you so fast you won't even register it. You try not to think about that. But every time you hear a metallic clang or the clatter of a dropped ammo tin, your heart skips a beat. Pressure from above. The Departamento Munitorum cares only about one thing, that the right ammo gets to the right front by the right date. If that means you must unload a cargo lifter full of unstable shells in an hour, you do it, sweating and swearing under your breath. The phrase acceptable losses is thrown around by pencil pushers who've never had to scoop their friend's remains into a bag after an accident. But if shipments are late or numbers don't add up, it's not those administrators who get punished. It's you and your foreman. The foreman, under strain, might then skimp on safety checks or push you beyond fatigue because a commissar is breathing down his neck about meeting the crusade timetable. This means you work long shifts with minimal downtime, moving ordnance even when your muscles tremble with exhaustion. And fatigue and explosives are a bad mix. Mistakes happen. A pallet not secured properly. A warhead not stored in the correct humidity-controlled locker. You try to focus, but you know you're one fumble away from being red mist. Human error, human cost. The work crews are tight-knit because you literally hold each other's lives in your hands. Everyone double-checks each other's work when possible. Did you disengage that safety? Okay, good. A lapse by one person can doom everyone. That pressure and camaraderie form strong bonds. If a newbie is careless, the veterans will either drill caution into them, or, if they're hopeless, get them reassigned quick to latrine duty or some other relatively safe backwater, because no one wants a walking accident nearby. It's one job where peer pressure to not be sloppy is intense. Despite precautions, accidents still occur. The stories accumulate. Old Armageddon pattern shells, deemed stable, spontaneously cooking off after you spent all day stacking them. A mislabeled crate of melta charges that a team unknowingly treated like regular shells. They went high order and left nothing but a smoking crater and questions. After each incident, Munitorum investigators comb through logs to assign blame. 9 times out of 10, they peg it on worker negligence. The truth may be something out of your control, like a hairline crack in an ancient munition, but the Imperium doesn't acknowledge system failure. So survivors get punished, or docked pay, or a scapegoat gets executed to satisfy the lesson learned requirement. It's beyond unfair. Not only do you watch colleagues die, you might get shot afterward as accountability. And yet, the job goes on with the same dangerous stockpiles and no new safety measures. Enemies all around. As if internal threats weren't enough, ammunition depots are prime targets for saboteurs and enemy attacks. Chaos cults would love to blow up your facility to cripple Imperial supply lines. So would Orc commandos or Eldar raiders or any number of hostile forces. Security is always on edge for infiltrators. You might arrive one morning to find half your work crew dead, throats slit by stealthy intruders, a horrifying reminder that you're on a battlefield, just one behind the scenes, or a distant explosion signals a strike on another part of the depot. When this happens, the lucky scenario is everything just goes boom and it's over. The unlucky one is partial damage that causes multiple small fires and slow-cooking detonations, while you and others scramble desperately to contain it. The difference between heroism and horrific death in those moments is razor-thin. Every shift a gamble. Day by day, you train yourself into careful routines. Lift gently, set gently, verify labels thrice. Say a little prayer to the Emperor and the Omnissiah whenever you handle something especially nasty. Can't hurt might help. You get superstitious. That one loader servitor that always squeals before a jam, you treat it like a harbinger and double-check everything when it cries. At the end of a shift, you exhale relief that you lived to clock out. You and your mates might share a nervous laugh and an obscura puff outside the depot, shaking hands that still tremble from adrenaline. Then it's barracks, sleep, filled with dreams of muffled explosions and falling ammunition boxes, and back to it again. There's no recognition in this job, no medals for avoiding 10 disasters in a week. If you do everything right, no one notices. If you screw up once, you and many others could die and possibly be branded traitors or incompetents in death. But through your thankless toil, Imperial Guard regiments get their bullets on time, Navy ships get their torpedoes, and the war against darkness rages on. So you cling to that as a grim point of pride. Without the ammo grunts like you, the whole crusade might stall. And in a universe as unforgiving as Warhammer 40K, even the lowliest have their part in humanity's struggle. Yours just happens to be moving mountains of explosives while hoping today isn't your day to become one. Holy Cathedral Cleaner, Temple Sanitation Acolyte. High above the marble floors of a grand Imperial Cathedral, almost lost in the dimness of the vaulted ceiling, a tiny figure clings to a flying buttress, scrubbing off the dried blood of last week's Heretic sacrifice. That's you, the Holy Cathedral Cleaner, one of the pious few, red unlucky laborers, entrusted with keeping the Emperor's houses of worship sparkling and spotless. In a universe of decorative skulls and endless candles, someone has to deal with the mess. It's a dangerous, dizzying, and often unsettling job, equal parts janitor and acolyte, and it might be the closest thing to literal church slavery imaginable. Monumental task, literally. Imperial temples and cathedrals are colossal. The main nave can be tall enough to fit a hab block, and the spires stab the sky. Cleaning one is like cleaning a mountain from the inside. You spend your days at terrifying heights, dangling from creaking servitor-operated lifts or clambering up wrought iron scaffolds that would give an Arbite's pause. A fall from the rafters would mean plummeting hundreds of meters onto unforgiving stone and possibly onto the hallowed Aquila mosaic you just polished, which would be doubly shameful. Safety harnesses, perhaps a rope around your waist if you're lucky. But the ecclesiarchy often trusts in faith more than ropes. The Emperor protects, they say. You mutter, the Emperor isn't the one up here dusting gargoyle heads. Your cleaning tasks range from the mundane to the macabre. One morning, you might be carefully wiping soot off towering stained glass windows from the outside in midair in a howling wind. The glass depicts saints and martyrs, and heaven forbid their visages are obscured by grime. That afternoon, you're inside the sanctum scrubbing the flagstones after an auto-da-fe mass execution of heretics. Yes, someone has to clean the charred remains and spilled blood once the faithful finish cheering and go home. That someone is you and your mop, bucket, and a strong back. Gruesome duties. Cathedrals often become sites of intense devotional fervor, which in 40K can mean mass ritual, which can mean huge messes. Purge a chaos cult in the crypts. You're disinfecting every nook where flecks of demon ichor sprayed. 100 penitents flagellated themselves last night. Pools of blood in the transept need mopping before morning prayers, thank you. Even routine stuff like the daily incense burning leaves, sticky resin, soot on every surface, high and low. No mechanicus cleaning automata. They'd be considered disrespectful in such sacred space. Or perhaps they tried and they fell from a spire. It's all manual labor by candlelight. Sometimes your work brushes uncomfortably close to the unholy. Imagine quietly scraping off weird cult symbols that some heretic scrawled on a pillar before their plot was foiled. The Inquisitor told the priests the runes had no power now that the cultist was dead. But as you chip them away with a chisel in the silent, empty cathedral at 2 a.m., you can't help but feel watched. You pause, heart pounding, certain that one of the cherubim statues is looking at you differently. You shake it off and continue working, because finishing the task is safer than failing to. You know the Inquisition burns those who show undue superstition. Perilous heights. About those heights, let's elaborate. Cathedrals have arching ceilings and high frescoes that gather dust and cobwebs just like a lowly HAB unit ceiling would. To clean them, you utilize rickety scaffolds or swing from a harness attached to ancient winches. The gear is usually as old as the cathedral, and some cathedrals are millennia old. You've heard ropes snap and seen colleagues fall into the abyss of the nave. One survived only because he landed in a heap of empty prayer cushions, breaking most of his bones, but he lived. The ecclesiarchy considered it a miracle, though they did dock his pay for damaging the floor. After that, you double-check every knot yourself and whisper the litany of Saint Uriel, patron of those who work at heights, before stepping off the ledge. Even on ground level, the architecture itself is hazardous. You might have to climb out on a narrow flying buttress to scrub pigeon droppings off a sacred statue, balanced precariously with nothing between you and the courtyard far below but air, or squeezing through crawl spaces behind the organ pipes to dust them. One slip and you're tumbling onto the organist's bench in the middle of Mass. Yes, you've seen it happen. The congregation thought it was a possessed instrument and nearly lynched the poor cleaner who fell. Spiritual unease. There's something else. Cathedrals at night are creepy. All that Gothic grandeur, normally filled with choirs and worshippers, becomes a silent, cavernous vault. Your candle's light throws dancing shadows of saints and gargoyles. It doesn't help that the relics stored here supposedly have quirks. Maybe you need to polish the glass case of a saint's skull. You swear its empty eye sockets followed you one night, or that you heard faint whispering from it. Officially, if you report whispers, the clergy will tell you it's the Emperor speaking to your soul, a blessing. Unofficially, you suspect maybe some warp echo lingers in these hallowed halls. It makes you quicken your work and rejoin the other servants where there's light and company. And let's not forget, if anything goes missing or is defaced on your watch, Emperor forbid, some heretic breaks in and vandalizes a shrine overnight, guess who gets suspicion cast on them? You, the lowly cleaner who should have seen or heard something. At best, you're flogged for negligence, at worst interrogated for collusion. So you carry the heavy keys to every side chapel like they weigh a ton, making sure each reliquary is exactly as you left it. No applause, only expectations. Of course, nobody in the congregation thanks you for your service. If they notice your work, it's only when something isn't perfect. A high ecclesiarchy official might run a gloved finger along a windowsill and tut if it comes back gray. You'll then get an earful from the prelate about laxity in the house of the God Emperor. The best praise you might ever get is a passing comment that the marble floors gleam nicely today, and that only happens if some visiting cardinal from off-world remarks on it, maybe in surprise that a backwater cathedral can shine so. Usually you're invisible, which is how the holy men like it. The faithful should think angels keep this place pristine, not sweat-soaked laborers on their hands and knees. Despite all this, you take a quiet pride in your work. It is the Emperor's house, and you're keeping it worthy. When the morning sun shafts through the stained glass you just cleaned, painting the now spotless floor in hues of red and gold, you can't help but smile a bit. You, a nobody, facilitated that beauty. It's a modest, honest pride that perhaps keeps you going when you're shoulder-deep in offal, scrubbing a blood font. You finish each day bone-tired, feet aching from climbing countless steps. Oh, the steps. Cathedrals love endless stairs. But you also know that as night falls, the grand cathedral will stand pure and shining for another day, ready to awe the faithful. And that's because of the unseen, unthanked work you and your fellow cleaners do behind the scenes. It's not glorious, but it's service, and in the grim darkness of the far future, even the lowliest service to the Emperor is a kind of honor. At least that's what you tell yourself as you bandage a fresh blister from scrubbing one too many Iron Skull crests. Reclamation Worker, sewer recycling tech. Deep in the bowels of the Hive City, below even the dingiest hab levels, lies a maze of pipes, pumps, and cisterns, the circulation system that brings recycled water and air to the teeming billions above. As a reclamation worker, you keep this lifeline flowing, tending to the sewers and recycler systems that turn the hive's endless waste into something vaguely usable again. It's filthy, perilous work that combines the duties of a sewer technician, plague doctor, and occasional beast hunter. If the Holy Throne has a latrine, you're the one at the bottom with the brush. Sewage and salvation. The job of your team is to maintain and repair the vast network of purification tanks, sludge processors, and venting tunnels. Every drop of water in a hive likely passed through your filters half a dozen times. Every breath of fresh air may have been scrubbed by the algae vats you service. If you all walked off the job, the upper hive would choke on its own fumes and drown in its own garbage within a week. Of course, no one topside gives a sump rat's tail about that. They just notice when their faucet runs brown or a mysterious smell wafts up from the vents. Then they curse the underhive scum until things improve. Things only improve because you risk your life to fix whatever broke down in the depths. Toxic workplace. The environment in the Reclaimer Underworks is a lethal stew. Open vats of bio-sludge stew and bubble with chemicals. The air is humid, warm, and carries the gagging mix of fecal rot, industrial solvents, and fungal spores. You wear a rubberized jumpsuit and a rebreather mask caked in grime, but even that isn't enough. After a shift, your skin itches and your eyes burn. Many of your colleagues develop growths or strange coughs after a few years. Some say it's Nurgle's minor blessings. Others say it's just toxic poisoning. Either way, Medicaid down here are rare. Who's paying for your anti-corrosion lung tonics? No one. So you endure, hope your body's one of the lucky resistant ones, and keep a rag handy to wipe the blood when you cough a bit too hard. A lot of work is clearing blockages. Yes, literal clogs of muck in giant sewage arteries. Sometimes you get sent with a pneumatic prod to poke at a gelatinous mass that's jammed a pipe big enough to drive a ground car through. It's disgusting but straightforward until something moves. You see, where there's waste, there's often life of a sort. Creatures of the sump, the legends of hive cities are rife with things like sump crocs or chem gators, mutant reptiles released as pets long ago that now roam the drain channels, or swarms of albino sewer rats big as hounds, or worse, gene-stealer cultists using the dank tunnels as their highways. In your line, those legends are often true. You might be thigh-deep in a sludge sump, hauling a replacement valve into place, when a ripple in the filth behind you is the only warning before a pale, eyeless creature lunges. Maybe it's a grotesquely mutated eel or a carnivorous maggot cluster the size of a man. Either way, you're grappling in knee-high sludge with no one but your similarly armed with a wrench or rivet gun coworker to help. You carry a revolver or shotgun, if management issues them. Often they prefer you not be armed, citing trust in the Emperor's protection. But enough incidents forced their hand. Still, firearms in enclosed, methane-filled tunnels. You've seen someone fire a las pistol at a charging feral mutant, only to blow out a pipe and ignite a pocket of gas. Sure, it killed the mutant, and nearly everyone else in the blast radius, so you rely more on blunt tools and blades despite the horror facing you. It isn't all giant gators and mutants, though they get the holodramas made about them. More often, it's the little pests, razor-toothed millipedes swarming on the ceilings, toxic slime molds creeping over walkways. One touch of those and your skin blisters. You've had to exterminate colonies of acid roaches that nested in vent filters, or clear out a pack of scavenger scum who set up a hidden hideout near a main purifier pump. They'll stab a worker for his tools in an eye blink if you aren't cautious. Every corner down here holds a new unpleasant surprise. Disease and mutation. We can't talk about sewers without disease. Despite immunizations, you and your mates catch things. Recycler's fever, a week-long bout of shakes and delirium from mild toxic exposure, is common. The threat of more exotic illness is ever present. Nurgle cults sometimes toss contagions into the sump just for kicks. If a batch of Corpse-Starch Uphive is tainted, guess who's investigating the effluent for traces of poisons or plague? Yup. You, in full hazmat gear, wading through runoff with a sensor, praying you don't find a viral strain that eats through suits. One of your crew disappeared once on a solo inspection run. Later you found him, or what was left, fused to the wall by a growth of bright glowing mold. He had disturbed a spore colony of Emperor knows what, and it consumed him. The foreman insisted on retrieving his still-sparking rebreather unit, its company property. Your other buddy had to scrape it out of the mold, gagging at what else came loose. We then torched that tunnel section with promethium, possibly overkill, but no one complained. The risk of mutation from prolonged exposure is the whispered fear. It's taboo to talk about, but you all quietly look out for each other. If someone's skin starts flaking green or an extra finger budges out, well, what can you do? If the Arbites notice, that worker is disappeared, off to an Inquisition black van. Some crews have, in dark confidence, euthanized a friend who was clearly mutating, to spare them a worse fate at the Inquisitor's hands, and to avoid the team being accused of heresy for harboring them. This is the level of grim loyalty and dread you operate under. Thankless necessity. Like other peasant jobs, no one topside cares about you until something goes wrong. But if you fail, everyone will know. A clogged pipe you didn't clear might burst and flood a market level with effluent. Then the nobles are screaming, and a garrison of stormtroopers is sent below to find the saboteurs responsible, because they won't believe it was just lack of maintenance. Or an Underhive plague that could have been neutralized at the source, if only we'd had better gear. But we didn't, and now it's spreading. Guess who gets blamed, and probably executed as a scapegoat? Not the governor who cut the sanitation budget. He'll blame the lazy reclamation crews. So you trudge on, day after day, with mostly your own pride and camaraderie as motivation. Because at least you know how critical your work is. When you walk the upper hive streets, on rare days off, you look at the sparkling fountains and clear dome skylights and think, that wouldn't be possible without me down in the muck, making sure the water is purified and the air circulates. Of course, you also think, those gilded fools have no idea what lurks beneath their feet and what I've seen. At shift's end, you haul your sore body back to the barracks in the lower hive, maybe stopping by a makeshift shrine to say a prayer that tomorrow the sump doesn't finally take you. It's gritty, grueling, and perilous, but it keeps the hive alive. In the Imperium, that's merit, even if no one says thank you. Your thanks is that the lights stay on, the water runs, and for one more day the grand machine of the hive doesn't grind to a poisonous halt. It's not much, but it's what you have. Heretic Pyre operator, mass executioner. By the light of 100 burning heretics, you stand sweating in soot-stained coveralls, tending the flames. You are the Heretic Pyre operator, executioner in all but name, responsible for turning enemies of the Imperium into so much ash on a daily basis. It's a holy duty according to the ecclesiarchy, but one that comes with blood, smoke, and the constant stench of charred human flesh. After all, when your job revolves around burning the unclean, you occasionally get burned back, physically or otherwise. The Emperor's bonfire. Your office is typically a giant crematoria complex attached to an Arbite's courtyard or cathedral square. It might feature iron stakes for public burnings, large promethium-fueled furnaces for bulk incinerations, or open pits for mass pyres. One day, you could be marching a line of recidivist cultists up onto a scaffold, chaining them in place beneath a bundle of tinder. The next, you're shoveling the remains of yesterday's purge into barrels, making room for the next batch. It's execution on an industrial scale. You're less headsman and more assembly line worker of death. When a heresy trial pronounces 20 people guilty, guess who preps the burning site? You, spreading flamer fuel and placing ignition incense for dramatic effect. During the burning, it's your hand that lights the first torch or triggers the flamers at the magistrate's order. You try to block out the screams. The ecclesiarchy tells you those are cleansing, virtuous screams, the sound of evil being purged. But to you, they're just human agony. As they die, you maintain the fire, toss more promethium if parts of the pyre aren't catching, ensure none of the condemned breaks loose and runs out in immolation. That happens. It's horrifying. A living torch sprinting toward the crowd. It's on you to tackle them back into the fire, or put them down with a sidearm as mercy or simply containment. Smoke and shadows. The aftermath is grim. The reek of burnt hair, flesh, and sulfur clings to everything. Soot coats your face like war paint and finds every crevice of your clothes and lungs. Your eyes water constantly, partly from acrid smoke, partly from the knowledge that you are essentially a killer of possibly dozens a week. At first, it gave you nightmares, but with time, you compartmentalize. They're heretics. I'm aiding their souls by destroying their corrupt bodies. Or so the confessor preaches. Regardless, the image of contorted, blackened corpses sometimes surfaces when you close your eyes. You also handle disposal. Charred bones and ash have to be cleaned up, often by lower assistants, but sometimes it falls to you. These remains are unceremoniously dumped. If it was a holy burning, maybe some ashes are mixed into sacred mortar for a church or something, but usually not. You learn to shove human residue with a shovel as dispassionately as clearing coal from a furnace. Vengeful associates. Every heretic you burn likely has kin or compatriots out there. It doesn't take a hive gang boss to figure out who the hooded executioner was. Your face might be hooded during ceremonies, but around the precinct you're known. You've received death threats, scrawled in rust on the wall of your quarters, murderer, and a crude skull, ironically right above the aquila you painted for devotion. Enforcers sometimes escort you if tensions are high, but not always. You've taken to living in the Arbite's barracks or a back room of the temple for some safety. You've heard rumors of pyre tenders stabbed in alleys by cult sympathizers seeking revenge. It's got you jumpy. When walking home, you keep one hand on a concealed stub gun, eyes darting at shadows. Ironically, you're as likely to be attacked by some mob of true believers applauding your work as by cultists. Not to kill you, but perhaps to pull you aside and ask if you saw the devils leaving the heretics as they burned, or other fanatical nonsense. You're viewed alternately as a grim necessity and someone to fear. In normal society, executioners historically were ostracized, despite doing the law's work. In the Imperium, it's similar. Citizens might avoid eye contact with you or mutter "witch burner" in superstitious discomfort when you pass. It's a lonely job. pure in body if not mind. Because you handle the impure, the ecclesiarchy monitors you for any sign of corruption. Regular purity checks are mandatory. A confessorial priest might surprise you with a visit, asking pointed questions. When the witch shrieked, did you feel pity? Temptation? Describe your thoughts. Emperor help you if you answer anything, but I felt the Emperor's righteousness, Father. They even occasionally administer purity seals to you before a major execution, as if you were a weapon needing blessing. Maybe you are. On feast days of the Emperor, you're expected to self-flagellate alongside the clergy to prove your faith remains zealous. Part of you resents it. After all, you kill traitors daily. What more proof do they need? But another part worries. Maybe they're right to check. Handling so much death could crack anyone's soul. You've caught yourself becoming too numb, or on the flip side, too heated. One time you found yourself smiling slightly as a particularly hateful heretic howled in flame. That smile haunted you later. Are you enjoying this? That way lies madness, or Korn's grip. So you actually appreciated the next day's stern sermon on humility that the bishop directed at you. Mundane horrors. It's not all grand bonfires of corruption. Plenty of days, it's just disposing of executed prisoners en masse behind closed doors. Gas chamber full of malcontents gassed last night. You get to wheel their bodies into the incinerator, one after another, pull the lever, watch the green flame and acrid smoke belch out. For hours, maybe humming a hymn to drown out the sound of sizzling fat. There's nothing dramatic or holy in that moment. You're a crematorium worker, simply eliminating inconvenient flesh and disease vectors. Or the High Judge sentences a minor cult to death by firing squad. After the guns, they call you to burn the bodies out in the ash wastes. You do so basically alone with a flamer, turning a ditch of corpses into a charnel pit. You breathe through a rebreather, but the smell is inescapable. These routine slaughters weigh on you more than the big ceremonial pyres, oddly. At least those have pomp and a sense, perhaps false, of glory. The quiet disposals feel more like murder. You push those thoughts away, repeating the catechism. The wages of heresy are paid in flame. Sense of duty. Why continue? Well, for one, you weren't exactly given a choice. This duty may have been assigned as punishment for a minor crime, or as the role your family had for generations. Some Schola Progenium grads end up as sanctifiers, aka executioners. But over time, you've also come to see it as necessary. You whisper to each condemned, if they're not already shrieking, a quick prayer of repentance as you chain them up. Not because you think they deserve mercy, but just in case it helps their soul find the Emperor's light at the very end. In a twisted way, you sometimes feel pity. Many heretics you burn are just poor fools who got led astray. The real villains, demons, chaos marines, are far away. You're mostly roasting humans. It eats at you if you dwell on it, so you focus on duty. By incinerating these corrupted, you prevent them from potentially damning others or themselves further. You tell yourself it's a mercy compared to what the Inquisition's torture chambers would do if they lived. At the end of the day, after the fires are out, you strip off your soot-crusted gloves and sometimes stare at your trembling hands. In that moment, you allow a brief bit of disgust or sadness at what you do to surface. Then you bury it deep, wash your hands, the water runs black initially, and report in your log that the Emperor's justice was carried out for however many souls. Then you go collapse on a cot, dream of flames, and wake to do it again. In the grim darkness of the far future, someone has to hold the torch. And so you will, until either the Emperor calls you to account for your own sins, or a vengeful cultist's knife finds your ribs in a dingy alley. At least you reckon if you die, they'll cremate you quick. Emperor knows you wouldn't want to end up on the other side of the pyre for once. Slave builder of Mega-Cathedrals. Gothic construction drudge. Under the baleful glow of a forge world sky, or in the vacuum-sealed dome of a shrine planet, titanic monuments of faith and war are built, spires kilometers high, fortresses the size of cities. These edifices demand more than machines and architects. They demand human lives by the thousands. As a slave builder, you are the brawn raising these Gothic mega-structures block by block. It's endless drudgery at lethal heights under brutal overseers. You're not even a person in this system, just another brick to be mortared into the Imperium's towering legacy. Endless toil, zero safety. Your day begins before the sun, if the sun's even visible on this smoggy world, with the crack of a slaver's electro-whip on the Hab-Barrack spars. You and perhaps 10,000 other indentured laborers shuffle out and march to the construction site. Looming above is the skeleton of greatness, maybe the half-finished arches of a grand cathedral, or the stump of what will be a gargantuan fortress wall. It's hard not to feel awe and dread, knowing you have to climb that today. Work is 20 hours a day, minimal breaks. You haul stones that autocranes cannot reach or delicately position ornate statuary under an overseer's glare. You mix and pour plescrete by hand where servitors are too bulky to go. Your entire life is lift, carry, climb, dig. The body gives out quickly. You see people collapse daily from exhaustion or malnutrition. When that happens, the overseers will beat them to death in front of you as an example, or simply drag them off, to become servitors or corpse-starch, perhaps. A fresh replacement from the endless supply of imperial prisoners or hive debtors steps in, and the great project continues. There are no guardrails on those mile-high scaffolds. One misstep on a narrow beam, one dizzy spell from hunger, and you're tumbling. Often you don't even hit ground. You bounce off a lower strut or fall into a machinery pit. Whatever the case, no one will retrieve you until perhaps days later when your mashed remains are shoveled out to clear the way. Sometimes not even then. More than one buttress cavity has a builder's tomb entombed within, where a fallen worker was literally bricked over because it was easier than removing him. Superstition among us slaves says those poor souls become vengeful spirits that curse the building. If something collapses unexpectedly or an overseer has a fatal accident, we like to think it's the dead getting revenge. It's cold comfort. Brutal overseers. The ecclesiarchy or mechanicus or administratum, whoever is in charge, appoints taskmasters to drive the labor. They are often planetary defense troopers or mechanicus engineers with a penchant for cruelty, armed with shock prods, whips, even neural implants to inflict pain at the push of a button. They don't tolerate the slightest delay. If a section is behind schedule, they might line up the exhausted crew and execute every 10th person as motivation. You've seen it happen. After that, fear pushes you beyond sane limits of fatigue. Sometimes it's not even anyone's fault. A supply shipment of girders arrives late, halting work. The overseers still blame us, claiming we loitered. Cue another beating or ration cut. So you find yourself praying not just to survive your own errors, but for luck that your masters don't screw up and take it out on you. Speaking of rations, you get a daily bowl of corpse-starch gruel and perhaps a vitamin pellet. It's barely enough to keep a man alive doing light work, much less heavy labor. You're always hungry, always getting thinner unless you were fat to start. Few are after some months. The only solace is that the weak die off fast, leaving a sort of grim cadre of survivors who tough it out together. High-altitude construction. High stakes. The scale of what you're building is incomprehensible from below, but up on the scaffolds you see the whole hive spread out beneath like a checkerboard. It's strangely beautiful and terrifying. Winds whip at that height. A sudden gust can tear a slack rope or catch a sheet of plasteel and send it sailing. You hold on for dear life when that happens, as everything not bolted down goes flying. Orbital bombardment tremors sometimes shake the structure. The far-off war front sends occasional quakes through the planet crust that ripple up those mega-spires. You feel it sway, and you pray, because if this thing comes down while you're on it, you'll be atoms. It's happened. A half-built spire deemed not pious enough by a visiting inquisitor was demolished in a controlled blast. They did not evacuate the slaves first. Time is money, and they considered us acceptable collateral. Hundreds of our fellow workers in a blink, dust on the wind. Then they commanded us to start over and build it again, differently. If despair were a toxin, we'd all be dead just from that moment. But we kept going because, well, there's no alternative but death or a mind wipe to become a servitor. Random carnage. Construction accidents are constant. Huge cranes swing loads above. One slip of a cog and a multi-ton block comes loose, pancaking a dozen workers below. A plasma cutter misfires and slices through a scaffolding support. Down comes an entire section of platform with 50 people on it. Once, a poorly calculated stress on a part of the fortress wall caused a whole segment to collapse in on a night shift, burying 200 slaves alive in rubble. We dug frantically to reach survivors. The overseers let us, since those people were still useful if saved early. We pulled out maybe 10, the rest suffocated. Next morning, no solemnity, just a curt order. Clear those bodies out of the foundation pit. They're contaminating the mortar mix. There's also the occasional off-world threat. A PDF anti-air gun on the nearly finished battlements might attract enemy fire during a battle. Stray shots from an orc raid overhead have rained on our site, turning squinting stone layers into red mist. Or a chaos cult sabotage. Yes, sometimes those we're forced to work alongside harbor cultists who hate the cathedral they're building. One lunatic revealed himself midday, chanting and blowing up a demo charge at a key beam. Dozens more died and the work was set back months. We had to pick charred slave bits off rebar ends before continuing. After that incident, the overseers became even more vicious, suspecting cult influence everywhere. Only heretics slack or complain became their mantra as they lashed us. Mental and spiritual toll. Grueling doesn't begin to describe it. Your body is broken, yes, but also your mind shrivels. You're not allowed to talk freely, too much chatter and the whip cracks. Many slaves turn into hollow-eyed drones, just following orders, daydreaming of anything else. Some whisper about uprising, but it's a fantasy. We have no weapons or energy, and any hint of revolt is met with immediate mass executions. They'd rather waste 1,000 slaves than risk an insurrection spreading. So you banish thoughts of escape or resistance. Survival mode, that's all. Oddly, some slaves cling to faith in the Emperor even harder. Our suffering here builds his glory, an old man once told me as we hauled stone. We'll be rewarded in death, if not in life. Perhaps he's right. He died the next week from a fall, so I hope the Emperor did have a place for him. But I notice the ecclesiarchy doesn't preach that particular angle to us. They fear slaves embracing martyrdom too eagerly. Some might jump intentionally to escape and call it holy. Can't have that. They need us alive. So they feed us just enough hope. A minor preacher might come say a mass on site occasionally, telling us that to be part of constructing a temple is an honor. That does feel true sometimes. I can say I laid that stone when the grand basilica is complete, if I'm around to see it. That tiny pride keeps a flicker of spirit alive. In the end, either the project finishes or you do. If, by some miracle, you survive until the cathedral or fortress is done, what then? Typically, a token handful of slaves might be freed symbolically at the dedication ceremony, a PR gesture. The rest of you? Shipped to the next project, likely, or simply told to tear it down and start anew if a higher-up decrees so. There's no retirement plan, no final payout. You work until you drop. Yet, in the face of utter despair, we survivors form a brotherhood of sorts. We share what meager things we can. A sip of saccharin drink here, a friendly shoulder rub on a break to ease cramps, a quiet song hummed together on the scaffold to lift spirits. Hymns are allowed. Overseers think it encourages piety. This solidarity is the only thing that humanizes us in an inhuman existence. So you, the slave builder, carry on stone by stone, life by life, raising monuments that will stand for millennia, monuments no one will remember you by. But as you place each block and tighten each girder, maybe, just maybe, the Emperor sees your sacrifice. At least that's what you tell yourself when you collapse at night, every muscle screaming. It's either that or accept the truth, that you're living and likely dying, mortar for the Imperium and nothing more. Starship Air Recycling Tech, Void Life Support Operator. Far below the grand deck of a void ship, past gun batteries and engine rooms, lies the Life Sustainer, the chamber of humming filters and dripping condensers that keep the air breathable for tens of thousands of voidsmen. As the Starship Air Recycling Tech, you live among these ancient machines, ensuring that everyone from the Lord Admiral to the lowest deck rat gets to breathe another day. No one thinks of you until something goes wrong, and if it does, everyone dies, starting with you. Breath of the Emperor. A void ship's life systems are massive and old. Picture cathedral-like vaults filled with banks of algae tanks, green and sloshing, faintly glowing under grow lamps. Kilometer-long ventilation ducts, chemical scrubbers hissing as they strip carbon dioxide, and recyclers so antiquated they might as well be holy relics. Your job is part mechanic, part ritual tech priest, coaxing these temperamental systems to keep cycling. Daily duties include inspecting gauge readings of humidity, O2 levels, toxin counts. There's always something slightly off, a clogged filter here, an algae bloom dying off there. You schedule and perform maintenance constantly. If a filter clogs and CO2 creeps up, people start getting headaches in the lower decks, a dangerous sign if not caught. So you change it out, hauling a sludge-heavy mesh out of its housing, a two-person job made harder by the claustrophobic crawl space and the knowledge that interrupting airflow too long can cause a cascade pressure failure. Sometimes you physically have to crawl down a conduit, nearly naked, so you fit, to scrape mold or crust off vent interiors. You've gotten stuck before, truly panic-inducing in the pitch dark with metal squeezing on you, until a shipmate pulled you back by the ankles. The stale, the rank, the toxic. The air is never fresh, even on a good day. It always has an undertone of machine oil, body odor, and recycled flatness. When something's wrong, you smell it first. Ozone tang? Might be an electrical short leaking fumes in, sickly sweet rot, algae tank contamination, acrid bite that stings your eyes, a filter burnt out and now plasma exhaust or promethium vapors are in the mix. Your nose is a critical instrument. You've learned to identify dozens of off scents. It's ironic. Your life is about air, but you rarely breathe easy. The work area is often hot, humid, and full of chemical miasma. Rebreathers are for emergency only. You can't wear one 24/7. So you cough through minor irritants and hope long-term exposure doesn't kill you, though it probably will, many, in your trade die of tumors or lung degeneration after a few decades. Death, always lurking. Service in the Imperial Navy is dangerous for all, but usually from outside threats like boarding actions or warp accidents. For you, simply a fan's belt snapping at the wrong time can be death. One tech in a neighboring sector was fixing a secondary air pump when a power fluctuation stopped it. He didn't realize and opened the pressure hatch. The sudden vacuum sucked the air and his organs out violently. We found him with his lungs protruding from his mouth, poor bastard. Lesson learned. Triple-check pressure seals, even if the cogitator says the sector's pressurized. If a serious life support failure occurs, you're truly in the hot seat. Imagine, a void battle damages the power relays, and the entire air system goes offline. Emergency bulkheads compartmentalize zones to preserve what atmosphere remains. Your console lights up with red warnings all over. It's on you to coordinate a restart or jury-rig backup systems fast. In movies, this is where the hero tech saves the ship with brilliance. In reality, you're racing through dark, airless corridors with a toolkit, holding your breath or sucking on a low-yield oxy-pass unit, ears popping, vision tunneling, trying to remember if it's valve 7 or 19 that must be opened to bypass the broken exchanger. One wrong guess and you waste precious minutes on a fruitless task, maybe condemning an entire lower deck to asphyxiation. You've lived through a close call like that. Once, during warp transit, a freak power loss knocked out environmental for about 4 minutes shipwide. It doesn't sound like much, but in some packed HAB sections far from reserves, CO2 spiked dangerously and oxygen dropped. People were screaming, a horrible sound to hear over Vox when you're desperately flipping switches to get main power back. Thank the Emperor, the engineers managed to route auxiliary power in time. Only a few dozen crew died, mostly very old or sick who couldn't handle the stress. But afterward, the captain gave me a dressing down for allowing such a thing to happen at all, as though I control warp turbulence. Ever since, I preemptively reroute backup power circuits whenever we translate to warp, just in case. Bottom of the void chain. You're a relatively low-ranking rating. If air quality dips slightly, officers call you to complain, as if you personally fouled it. I had a Lord Navigator insist I add extra incense to the ventilation near his chambers because he disliked the common smell of recycled air. I did, and of course that threw off the humidity balance in that section, which became my problem to solve when mold blossomed days later. You walk a fine line. Keep the brass happy with pleasant atmospherics, keep the machinery stable, keep the crew alive. It's thankless. No one praises, the air is so delightfully non-lethal today. They only notice when it's bad. But unlike many dismal jobs, you do get some quiet satisfaction. Every time I stroll to the upper decks and see thousands of men and women going about their duties, laughing, yelling, breathing freely, I think I helped make that possible. On a ship in the void, breath is literally life, and I own the breath. Well, the purity of it. That's something. We have a little tradition in the life support crew. At the end of each cycle, we share a toast, with recycled water spiked by whatever rotgut we can scrounge. We raise our cups and one of us says, "Here's to another day above decks for all of us." We drink to the simple fact that nothing catastrophic happened. It might be the blandest victory imaginable, but given the alternative, mass suffocation, it's a victory nonetheless, straddling 2 deaths. If or when the ship faces boarding or battle, our orders are clear. Stay at post until ordered to evacuate. We are among the last to leave a dying vessel, because as long as some air circulates, guns can still fire and crew can still fight. It's sobering to realize that in a worst-case scenario, they intend for us air techs to keep the systems running even as the ship burns or is boarded. Basically, keep everyone else breathing until they're dead, then you can die. We half joke about it. We go down with the airflow. But it is frightening. Many of us carry a small las pistol or knife at work, not to fight boarders in corridors, though that could happen, but with a pact that if trapped in a failing life support room with no way out, we'd give each other quick deaths rather than choke in the dark. Grim, but oddly comforting to have that understanding with your mates. Until that day, Emperor willing it never comes, we'll keep scrubbing air, balancing vapors, and chasing every hiss and rattle in the ducts. It may be invisible labor, but every crew member's life literally hangs on it. So tomorrow I'll wake, check CO2 readouts, oil a squeaky fan, and do my best to prevent any bad air day aboard our ship. For in Void, a bad air day can be your last. Plague Scrubber, post-pandemic cleanup crew. When war or plague ravages a hive or outpost, someone has to venture into the corpse-choked, virus-laden ruins and make them habitable again. That someone is you, the Plague Scrubber. You're not Adeptus Astartes or even properly trained Mechanicus Medici. You're a poor sod in ill-fitting hazmat gear, handed a sprayer of disinfectant and a burner, and told to sanitize entire districts where even the flies dropped dead. It's arguably the worst cleanup duty in the galaxy, traipsing through scenes out of Nurgle's nightmares, cleaning up after war's most insidious weapons, and hoping to Emperor that your protective suit holds. Quarantine Zone. Drudge. Picture a Manufactorum hab block where a Nurgle plague bomb hit last month. Quarantine orders kept anyone from entering since. The plague burned through the population like a wildfire. Bodies lie where they fell, slumped in doorways, piled in makeshift sick wards, riddled with boils, or melted into slime. The air is a stew of decay and lingering contagion. A greasy fog clings near the floor. Now the official order comes that this sector must be reclaimed. Perhaps refugees need housing, or the Inquisition declared the infection burnt out. They send in us, a cleanup platoon of penal workers and unlucky volunteers suited up in antiquated rebreathers and rubber coveralls. Our task: remove and incinerate all remains, scrub every surface with counterseptic chems, and make the place nominally safe for ordinary folk. It's grotesque in the extreme. Your day is spent lifting half-liquefied corpses with a partner, the flesh so decayed it sometimes slides off the bones as you move it, or shoveling piles of congealed vomit and blood into drums for disposal. We often find survivors too, not healthy ones, mind you. Some are plague zombies, essentially, still stumbling around in a fever haze, infectious as ever. Standard procedure is to put them down on sight. Cue you unholstering a battered auto pistol and ending the moans of a pustule-ridden wretch shuffling in a smoke-filled corridor. You tell yourself it's a mercy. Hazards, thick as flies. The obvious threat is disease. Despite the gear, you're keenly aware one tear in your suit or one slip in decontamination protocol could doom you. And not just you. You could carry the plague back out to the world at large. The weight of that responsibility sits heavy. You take every ritual, the suit pressure tests, the chemical showers, deadly serious. Some scrubbers get paranoid, practically bathing in sanitizer to the point of raw skin beneath. Then there's bio-booby traps. Possibly the cult of Nurgle that orchestrated a plague also left nasty surprises. We once had a trooper trigger a rigged jar of spores. It shattered and flooded the atrium with choking green mist. Poor guy's suit seal wasn't perfect. He convulsed and began sprouting fungal growths under his visor. We had to, well, protocol says if contamination is hopeless, eliminate the victim to prevent spread. We did what we had to. That night, a couple of us got drunk in the decon tent, trying to forget how he screamed at the end. Even absent sabotage, the environment itself can be dangerous. Plagues often come with panicked riots or combat, so the structures might be fire-damaged, full of bullet holes, on the verge of collapse. How many times have I carefully picked my way through a collapsed hab only to nearly fall into a basement when the floor gave out under the weight of wet corpses and me? Many. And war zones might have leftover ordnance. The guard might have shelled an infected area to purify by fire. Unexploded munitions lurk in rubble. We joke grimly that we're half bomb squad, half janitors. Minimal support. You'd think the Imperium would send heavy-duty help for such vital work. Sometimes they do. Mechanicus lone hazard servitors or a flamer tank to burn hotspots. But often resources are tight or the value of the site doesn't warrant elite units. So it's just us fleshy scrubbers doing things by hand. We have crude auspex to scan for pathogen levels, basic medkits in case we contract something. A single dose of generic antivirals is laughable against some of these designer plagues. If an area seems especially rife with pox ghosts or warp taint, not uncommon if chaos was involved, they might attach a junior ecclesiarchy priest to chant blessings as we work. Honestly, the droning litanies do bolster morale a bit in those hellish halls, but in practical terms, a priest is just another soft body that could get infected, so we end up protecting him more than he protects us. If one of us shows signs of sickness, the priest's duty is to execute and anoint. Comforting, huh? Psychological hell. The physical grime and danger is one thing, the mental toll is another. You see things that scar your soul, whole families lying in contorted death piles where they huddled together, children clutching toys melted by fever, parents' faces black with blood. You find messages scratched on walls by the dying, pleas for help that never came. It's heavy, too heavy sometimes. Many plague scrubbers go insane after a particularly bad clearing operation. I knew one woman who started hearing the voices of the dead begging her to stop burning them. She ran off unmasked into a plague zone, perhaps to join them. We never recovered her, and if we did, well, she wouldn't have been her anymore. The smell is also something you never forget. Sweet rot, like fruit gone bad, mixed with sour bile and chemical disinfectant. In quiet moments months later, you sometimes smell it out of nowhere and gag, tears springing. I doubt I'll ever enjoy the scent of anything again without that undertone haunting it. We cope through dark humor. They don't pay us enough for this, is a common understatement. We get hazard pay, but what good is money if you're dead or mutated? We make betting pools on how many body bags we'll fill, or joke that we should get a medallion from the governor for picking up his mess. It's laughter or despair, so we laugh. Uncelebrated saviors. After a successful scrub, we quietly vanish. The area gets declared habitable. New settlers move in. Priests reconsecrate a chapel. Life resumes. They don't mention us in any prayer or speech. If anything, they mention the bravery of the Astra Munitorum for winning the battle, or the grace of the Emperor for ending the plague. Fine, we didn't do it for glory. Honestly, by the end, most of us feel only numb relief that we contained the horror and can leave the quarantined zone. The satisfaction is bitter. We survived again and gave a district back to the Emperor's light. It's something. Then a week or a month later, there's another call, another hive outbreak, another biological attack, another research station that went dark after a disease breach. We suit up and step in once more. The fear is always there. Is this the one that gets me? But someone's got to do it, or the rot spreads and billions could die. We remind each other of that when morale flags. If not us, who? An old sergeant used to say as he cinched up his rebreather. He's gone now. Got a needle from a tainted booby trap under his fingernail. The infection took him in hours. So now I say it for him. I also quietly pray each time, Emperor, lend me your strength to endure this, and if I fall, please make it swift. Then I click on my mask's air supply, step into the eerily silent charnel house of a plague zone, and get to scrubbing, one corpse at a time. Data Scribe, Manual Archive Copyist. By the guttering candlelight in the depths of an administratum archive, you hunch over a desk piled high with mildewed scrolls. Your quill scratches away on parchment as your eyes strain to copy every stroke of high Gothic script exactly. You are a data scribe, a human cogitator, tasked with transcribing and duplicating the Imperium's endless paperwork by hand. It's dull until it's maddening, and occasionally, when you realize exactly what dangerous secret you're copying, it's quietly terrifying. Monastery of drudgery. Most likely you work in a vast scriptorium deep in a hive spire. Picture row upon row of desks, each with a hunched figure like yourself, all writing in near silence save for coughs and the scratch of quills. Towering shelves hold ancient tomes and stacks of inbound documents waiting to be copied. The air is heavy with dust and the tang of ink. You wear simple robes. Ink stains are your constant accessory. Your day is rigidly scheduled. At the bell's toll, you begin copying whatever the master archivist plops in your in basket. It might be a crumbling collection of planetary census ledgers that need duplication before the original disintegrates. Or a set of inquisitorial interrogation transcripts. Juicy stuff, but Emperor help you if you show any reaction while copying those. Hours blur as you meticulously handwrite column after column of numbers or passages of dry scripture and tithes. Breaks are few. Maybe a cup of recaf and a bite of corpse-starch at midday, then back to it until lights out. By then, your fingers are cramped into a claw and your vision is swimming. Every letter precious. Mistakes are not tolerated. One copying error in an official document can become a heresy or a fatal misorder down the line. The fear of slipping up haunts you. The overseers conduct random checks. If they find a discrepancy, Emperor forbid you wrote I-fi instead of 8 in some regiment count, you'll be lucky to escape with just a lashing or docked pay. If the document was high level, say coordinates for a fleet translation, and an error was missed until after execution, the consequences could be dire. There's an infamous story of a scribe on Scintilla who misplaced a decimal copyist mark in a tithe invoice, leading to shortfall that caused a food crisis. The administratum made an example of him, public flaying in the plaza. Might be apocryphal, but it keeps us in line, so you triple-check everything. This means your pace is glacial, but accuracy is life. You've developed little rituals. After each page, you hold it up, lips moving as you compare it to the original word by word. One senior scribe goes so far as to count letters and compare totals. It's painstaking, yet errors still happen because we're human. When one of us is caught making one, they're usually reassigned to menial duties, or retired if it was catastrophic. We have occasional new faces among us, replacements, and empty seats marking those who failed. Maddening repetition. 99% of what you copy is mind-numbingly mundane. Grain tallies, mining charter renewals, indenture contracts, etc. It's so easy to zone out, to let your mind wander. But that's when your hand might slip. so you cultivate razor focus. Some scribes recite the text under their breath as they write, a droning chant of bureaucracy. The fortunate ones, like me, actually like reading. I glean little factoids, the name of a distant agri-world here, a bit of revenue law there. I pride myself on understanding some context, but many scribes deliberately don't. They treat it as pure shapes to duplicate, maybe for sanity's sake. Only rarely does something truly interesting or secret cross our desks, but when it does, oh, it's tense. Imagine copying a sealed inquisitorial report. Yes, sometimes even those must be duplicated for select archives. Two overseers watch your every stroke. The report describes a cult uprising, perhaps, the horrors detailed. You want to read on out of morbid curiosity, but you fear showing any reaction. If your eyes widen or you inhale sharply at a revelation, the governor was a gene stealer, the overseers might note it and report that you read forbidden content not meant for your station. The safest bet is to copy without absorbing. I've trained myself to almost glaze my conscious mind while my copier's mind works. A split psyche. It's how I handle it. Humble perks. It's not all misery. The scriptorium is quiet and relatively safe from immediate physical danger. Unless an archive stack collapses on you or a candle ignites old paper, both have happened. In a war-torn universe, that's something. You're fed adequately. Brains need fuel for this, after all, and housed in the complex, simple but decent quarters. The work, however thankless, at least feels important in an abstract way. You're preserving knowledge, maintaining the Imperium's bureaucratic memory. The Emperor needs his records. When I copy an ancient parchment that outlines a treaty or a saint's decree, I get a small thrill that my quill strokes are the bridge between the past and future. We also develop a quiet camaraderie among scribes, spoken in hushed whispers during permitted social windows or via furtive notes hidden in margins. Yes, ironically, sometimes we communicate by writing notes we're forbidden to speak aloud. We joke about the particularly tedious documents. I fell asleep twice doing those administratum tax tables, or pool gossip gleaned from sensitive texts. Did you hear Planet X's cardinal was found a heretic? I copied the trial transcript last week. It's how we remember we're still human, not just copying servitor. Monk-like existence. Our lives resemble those of medieval monks in ancient Terra's history. We even wear tonsured haircuts as part of uniform. Celibacy is effectively enforced. We have no time or social opportunity for romance. Some scribes form deep friendships with each other as a substitute, or find solace in faith. Plenty of daily prayers in a scriptorium. There's an attached shrine where we join in matins and vespers. Illuminated manuscripts of the Imperial Creed line the halls. Ironically, those gorgeous illustrations inspire me more than the constant drudge lines I copy. I sometimes daydream of being an illuminator, drawing art instead of copying text. But that's not my lot. Creativity in our job is a sin. We must be a mirror, nothing more. A silent death. I know ultimately this work will likely kill me, if not by clerical error and punishment, then by eyesight failure or cramped health. Some old scribes retire, if they live to gray age, to trivial indexing tasks or become instructors. Most of us will just collapse at our desk one day, quill still in hand. They'll carry our body out quietly and replace us by the next shift. The Emperor's work goes on, but it comforts me that in a million modest ways, I have touched lore that binds the Imperium. I have copied lines that perhaps one day a commander will read and act upon. I have reproduced holy verse that clerics will preach. A tiny piece of me, in the form of pen strokes, resides in each archive copy I finish. It's a kind of immortality, even if anonymous. And in a grim future where life is cheap, knowing that something of your toil endures is what keeps my fingers moving and my eyes fixed on the next letter. So I dip my quill straight in my back and continue, one careful letter at a time, into the unending darkness. Temple Beggar-Sacrifice, pious offerant of the faithful poor. In the shadow of the great cathedral, you sit among dozens of other wretches, draped in rags, hand out for alms, back bent in feigned and real supplication. Officially, you're the pious poor, welcomed to the holy grounds to remind the wealthy of the Emperor's mercy and their duty of charity. Unofficially, you're also the first in line to be volunteered whenever the ecclesiarchy needs living offerings to appease the Emperor or meet some zealot's quota of sacrifice. As a temple beggar sacrifice, your life is a precarious mix of misery, devotion, and the looming possibility of being selected for a very final service. A life at the steps. You became a temple beggar likely because you had nowhere else to go. War or plague may have taken your family. The Hive's manufactoria might have chewed you up and spit you out disabled or too sick to work. The gutter or the church stoop were your only options. You chose the church, at least here they ladle out a thin soup to the poor after Mass, and the local Munitorum clerics preach compassion, in theory. The faithful drop coins in your bowl sometimes, more out of fear. There but for the grace of the Emperor go I, than kindness, but you'll take it. You cluster under the arches with the others at night for shelter. The steps of the shrine are your home. You scrub them in the morning as a sign of piety, hoping the verger doesn't chase you off. You mumble the prayers along with the congregation. In a way, you are devout. When you have nothing, faith is one of few comforts. But that faith is also exploited by the priests. They call you embers of the flock. In dark humor amongst yourselves, you call yourselves embers, because you often end up on a pyre, human offerings. When the ecclesiarchy or local ecclesiarchal authorities deem that a significant sacrifice or offering is needed, perhaps to sanctify a new altar or to plead for the emperor's intercession during a hivequake or epidemic, they often turn to those most readily available and dispensable, the mass of beggars and outcasts at the temple gates. It's always couched as an honor. The High Confessor will come among you, smiling, flanked by armored fratres militia, and ask for volunteers to join the Emperor in glory. Sometimes a few true fanatics step forward, believing in promised salvation. Other times, nobody moves. Then the militia simply seize the required number. It might be one or two for a small ritual, or a whole crowd for an extravagant purge. You've seen both. Once, on the Day of Atonement after a heresy scare, they rounded up 20 beggars, including a dear friend of yours who'd shared her bread with you, and marched them inside. You weren't taken that time. The lottery of fate spared you to watch in horror as black smoke and screams poured from the transept doors. No explanation after, just a homily on sacrifice and a notably emptier set of steps that night. You can run. Some do when they sense a selection coming, but to what? Hiding in the hive's underlayers and likely starving alone? At least here you die in sanctified ground and relatively quick. That calculation keeps many frozen in place even as the bishop's finger scans and points. You and you there, and the two sisters in the corner. Blessed are you, chosen of the Emperor. With that proclamation, your life expectancy drops to minutes or hours at most. Sacrificial service. If chosen, they treat you surprisingly gently at first. There's a weird pageantry to it. They may wash you, dress you in a clean white shift for purity. It might be the first bath you've had in years, and in any other context you'd be grateful. The clergy anoints your forehead with oils, murmuring prayers. Some beggars get caught up in the reverence of the moment, believing wholeheartedly they're going to meet the God Emperor and be forgiven of all sins. They sometimes go to their fate smiling or singing hymns. Others are paralyzed by fear, or weep quietly, or already half dead from a life of hardship and thus numb. The end could come in various forms. Often it's by fire. The ecclesiasts love their pyres. Perhaps it's a symbolic tithe of blood, where they cut throats over a chalice to sanctify an altar. Or a living internment. There are dark rumors of anchorites being sealed alive into the foundations of a new cathedral as eternal prayer offerings. You try not to think about those. From the Church's perspective, this is all holy. They truly believe the Emperor welcomes your sacrifice and that it benefits the whole community's spiritual welfare. The high priests sometimes frame it as promotion, from the lowest station to the Emperor's side in martyrdom. It might even be true in the cosmic sense, who knows? But materially, it's terrifying and painful. Between mercy and murder, to an outside eye, it's brutal exploitation, using the poor as disposable fuel for rituals. You and your fellow beggars know this, but you also cling to the faith that your life of suffering might get some meaning if it ends for the Emperor. Cognitive dissonance is strong. You have to believe that or despair completely. It's not uncommon for the beggar community to develop a martyrdom cult mindset, convincing each other that dying in a sanctified rite is the best one could hope for. Some days even you half believe it, especially if hunger is bad or disease is setting in. Then a quick holy death almost seems welcome. Other days you rage inside at the injustice. Those with wealth commit far greater sins. But it's the likes of you who get burned for the Emperor's favor. Uneasy existence. Every ceremony day or special feast you fret. Will they need someone? Will it be me? If a season passes without incident, you exhale in relief, but also guilt because that usually means some of your peers went instead. You likely have witnessed more than one such sacrifice, and that does things to the mind. A part of you is thankful it wasn't you, another part ashamed for feeling that when your friends died, you can't really fight back. The church militant is strong, and who would side with beggars over priests? So outwardly, you remain devout. The beggars attend mass, sing praises, hoping to appear too pious to execute, though ironically that might make you more attractive as a pure soul offering. It's a grim lottery of who's next, with no way to buy extra tickets or bow out. Amid this gloom, small kindnesses among your fellows keep you going. You share food, tend each other's sores, console those particularly afraid. A blind old man among you might murmur, "Peace, child. If they take you, face it bravely, and the Emperor will reward beyond this veil of tears." True or not, such words help. If you survive to old age. If you somehow avoid selection long enough to become feeble, the church may stop considering you. They prefer able-bodied victims who make a good show or yield lots of blood. At that point, ironically, you might be safer. There are a handful of ancient beggar women who sit in the front pews daily, practically mascots of the cathedral. The priests consider them blessed survivors, or use them as examples in sermons about piety's rewards. Maybe that'll be you one day, too wizened to bother sacrificing, left to shuffle around and light prayer candles for a few coins. It's not a great life, but it is life. In the meantime, each day is a tightrope of devotion and dread. You kneel on the cold stone in prayer and hope the Emperor truly watches over the least of his flock, as the scriptures say. Because down here at the bottom, it certainly feels like you're only ever one amen away from being marched to a noble death. Ratskin Underhive Scout. Native Hive Guide and Survivor. Deep in the toxic twilight of the Underhive live the so-called Ratskins, clans of hive natives adapted to the darkness and poison. As a Ratskin Underhive scout, you navigate the lawless, mutated interior of the city that most hive citizens pretend doesn't exist. You know the hidden paths, the safe wells, the migration patterns of sump beasts. This makes you both valued and exploited by the powers above. They'll use you as a guide, a tracker, a disposable pathfinder for anything too dangerous for an off-worlder. Your existence is freer than a bonded hive worker, but every expedition could be your last, and you're forever treated as something between a human and an animal. Child of the Sump. You likely were born in the depths. Your people have lived outside the structured hive society for generations, developing your own tribal customs. You wear patchwork leathers, perhaps decorated with the pelts of giant rats or other creatures, hence the name Ratskin. Your senses are keen from life in perpetual gloom. You can smell a chem leak or feel a floor about to give way before others. The Underhive is home. Its hazards are just the weather of your world. Bad air day, you know which mushrooms help the lungs. Acid storm from above, you have a hideaway that stays dry. Your tribe likely has a spiritual view of the hive. Many Ratskins believe the hive is alive, with a spirit, the hive mother, and every tunnel and level an organ in its body. These beliefs give you solace and a sense of purpose, but the hive upper echelons mock them as primitive superstition. Let them mock. You've seen things down here that their factory god engines can't explain. Possibly your shaman really can sense sump angry ghosts, or placate machine spirits with unique rites. Dangers of the deeps. Everything in the Underhive wants to kill you, but at least you know about it. You've mapped out territories of the giant sump spiders. Their webs are strong as wire. You pluck strands to make rope, but carefully so the 8 legs aren't alerted. You know which sludge pools are relatively safe to drink from, and which are home to carnivorous amoeba. When an off-worlder or spire-born gang chases you, you can slip down a side shaft that, unbeknownst to them, contains pockets of lethal gas. You hold your breath and pass. They rush in and choke. You consider the hive your ally in such moments. She protects her children and punishes the trespassers. But familiarity only gets you so far. There are zones even Ratskins fear, forbidden domes said to house ancient hexed tech or sealed plague coffins from past pandemics. You might hide from a gang by ducking into one, and then worry if the old tales of vengeful plague spirits or shadow souls are true as you spend a shivering night next to heaps of skulls. The Underhive plays such mind games often. And of course, other humans are a threat. Some hive scum think hunting Ratskins is sport. You've lost kin to such hunts. Enforcers treat you like vermin, often shooting on sight if you wander too near Uphive limits. You learned young to step silently and vanish fast at any sign of outsiders. You guide your people along hidden routes to avoid big clashes unless cornered. Then you fight viciously. A cornered Ratskin is not meek. Used as pathfinders. When upper hivers want something in the depths, archaeotech, escaped convicts, a secret route into an enemy stronghold, they seek a Ratskin scout. They don't ask nicely. Usually they coerce with threats or capture. Perhaps you or your father or sister were enslaved at gunpoint to lead a squad of Palanite enforcers through the maze to flush out a mutant cult. You do it because refusal means summary execution. But you resent being treated like a bloodhound. They bark orders, ignore your advice, and invariably when they blunder into an ambush or trap, guess who gets blamed? Treacherous Ratskin led us wrong. Then you're dodging their fire as well as the actual foes. Inevitably, they suffer casualties due to their own arrogance. Maybe a gang of scavies, Mutant cannibals you've long avoided fall upon the party in a toxic sump cavern. You slip away in the chaos, knowing staying means death either by scabby blade or enforcer accusation. If you make it home, you lay low a long time, lest they come looking to punish someone for that fiasco. Not all dealings are that hostile. Sometimes a cold trade guilder will hire you with actual pay to run contraband through secret routes. You may hate the poisons he peddles uptown, but the thrones he offers buy medicine for your fevered child, so you accept the risk. You become adept at moving through the hive unseen and using every hidden duct and forgotten maintenance shaft. It feels almost empowering that your primitive knowledge outwits high-tech sensors. But if caught, the guilders will disavow you, and the law will treat you as just another smuggler or saboteur and likely shoot you. High stakes for a few coins. That's life for you. Freedom and fragility. Unlike the enslaved manufacturer masses, you have a sort of freedom. No official papers, no fixed shift. You wander the guts of the hive at will, in tune with it, as your elders say. You might spend days on a solo hunt for a wild underhive beast for food, or gathering glow moss that can be processed into a healing salve. That independence is priceless. But it also means when you're in mortal danger, no backup is coming. No Arbites cares if a Ratskin disappears. Your resilience and cunning keep you alive where civilized folk would perish. But you're still human. One slip off a wet ledge, one bite from a rad scorpion, and you could die alone in the dark, body never found. Many of your friends have simply not returned one day. The tribe holds a quiet memory chant for them and moves on. Unsung, unbroken. The wider Imperium views you as a curious abhuman or filthy scavenger at best. They'll never acknowledge the crucial niche you fill in the hive ecology. Without people like you, toxic zones would spread unchecked. Ancient machinery in lost sections would never get minor repairs. Ratskins often prop up things to keep their areas habitable, or intel on brewing underhive threats would never reach the upper levels until far too late. You're an early warning system by your very existence, though no one formal recognizes it. You cherish your bonds with your tribe and the hive itself. It's a hard life, but an authentic one in your eyes. You're not plugged into mindless labor for some far-off lord. You're living by wits and grit in the Emperor's forgotten domains. Maybe you even prefer it this way. Uphivers sneer at you, but deep down you pity their soft, oblivious lives. They don't hear the hive mother's heartbeat like you do, or know the hidden beauties down below, like the bioluminescent fungi fields that glow blue in the deep caverns. Breathtaking. So you will continue to range the underhive as long as your lungs draw breath and your eyes see in the gloom. You'll guide those you must, evade or fight those who hunt you, and find solace in the quiet sump lake reflecting distant hive lights like stars. In a society that treats you as expendable, you find meaning in being the quiet guardian and wanderer of humanity's own underworld, unsung but unyielding. Agri-world field hand, feudal farmer under siege. Under the sun, or twin suns, or ash-choked daylight of an imperial agri-world, you toil in endless fields of grain or grox paddocks that stretch to every horizon. As an agri-world field hand, essentially a medieval peasant with slightly better tools, you spend dawn to dusk bent over crops or herding livestock to fulfill impossible tithe quotas. It's exhausting and monotonous at the best of times. But best of times are rare, because your farm is a tempting target for every marauder and disaster in the sector. One season you're breaking your back to meet the grain quota, the next you're running for your life from an orc raid, or watching warp storms turn your harvest to rot. To feed a million worlds. The local administratum doesn't care about your personal well-being. You exist to fill granaries. Every year, a percentage, often huge, of the planet's yield is required off-world. Failing to meet the tithe is heresy or treason in their eyes. Thus, as a serf under a planetary governor or noble landowner, you and your fellow villagers are driven relentlessly. There's no mechanization beyond maybe a few wheeled haulers. It's mostly plow oxen and scythes. The noble's administratum clerk shows up each month to measure progress. If you're behind, he'll order the overseer to double your working hours, already easily 14 plus a day, and cut your meager ration until you make efficiency. You've seen what happens when quotas aren't met. The nobility's enforcers ride in, make an example by lashing or executing the laziest-looking workers, maybe taking a child or two for indentured work in the noble's house as further punishment. So, however drained you feel, you grit your teeth and push the plow another slog through the dirt. The alternative, being branded a malcontent and flayed or sent to a penal legion, ensures compliance. Raiders in the wheat, the greatest threat is external. Your fields are fat targets on a largely undefended world. Orc freebooters love hitting agri-worlds for easy loot and a good fight. One summer afternoon, you recall, the sky filled with dropships and smoke trails. Your lord's manor had a few defense lasers, but not enough. The greenskins poured over the countryside on ramshackle warbikes, hollering and shooting wildly. They found it great sport to chase down fleeing farmers. You only survived by hiding in an irrigation ditch, half submerged, while hearing your neighbors' dying screams and the orcs' laughter. By nightfall, your settlement was burning husks and trampled crops. The orcs left. They never linger long, just in it for loot and a fight. You emerge to ruin. In the coming weeks, with minimal aid, you and the shaken survivors had to somehow salvage a harvest from this devastation, because the tithe didn't change just because orcs came. The Imperium doesn't do disaster waivers, so you worked near around the clock, hungry and grieving, to barely scrape enough grain together. The tithe officer still complained it was under quality as they loaded it. Then there are the Dark Eldar raids. Those are rarer but more horrifying. They come silently at night. Where orcs smash and roar, the Drukhari slip in. You wake up to commotion and strange lights. Maybe you saw a neighbor suddenly jerk into the air, ensnared by barbed hooks on a skimmer. If you're lucky, you hide until they've had their fill of captives and leave. If unlucky and taken, Emperor, have mercy. You won't return to these fields or anywhere with your soul intact. Human reavers and pirates also target you. A band of chaos cultists might decide to pillage remote farmsteads for supplies or sacrifices. Local defense forces rarely patrol the hinterlands. By the time they respond, raiders are gone and you're dead or destitute. You've learned to keep a hidden stash of food and a crude last-lock rifle buried in case you need to flee into the hills and survive a week on the run. Weather and warp wrath. Even the planet itself isn't gentle. Agri-worlds often have artificially boosted climates. Sometimes that goes awry. Droughts can crisp entire continents. You watch blackened stalks crumble in your hands and no even working triple, there's no saving the harvest. Or sudden warp-spawned storms, hail acid and lightning. One year, bizarre pink fungi sprouted overnight across the farmlands, likely a side effect of some chaos incursion half a planet away. The priests ordered burnings of infected zones, leaving charred earth for kilometers. Of course, they didn't reduce the tithe, you just had to produce the same yield on less land under worse conditions. Failing to produce means you're accused of lacking faith or effort. More lashings, more hours. It's not the Emperor sending these blights, we assume. but it's certainly us who pay the price. Beasts of burden. Day to day, you live like medieval times. Rise at dawn, work muscles to exhaustion by noon, quick lunch of crusty starch, then back to it until dusk. Family units help each other. Children shepherd groks or run water. The elderly do lighter tasks like scare off carrion birds. Still, nobody beyond age 50 is in the fields. They rarely live that long or are crippled by then and left to hobble around begging at the manor's kitchen for scraps. In the field, accidents happen. Archaic harvesting machinery can take a limb off. I saw a man lose an arm in a thresher. We cauterized it with a hot iron, and he was ordered back to work next week one-armed. His output counted as half a person for tithe. How generous. If you get badly injured beyond local fix, the noble's chirurgeon might dose you with painkillers, and that's it. If you can't work, you'll either starve or get picked up next tithe as part of the human levies. Guard conscription or servitor conversion. You work under the threat of 2 deaths, a slow one from overwork or a violent one from outside forces. And yet, you and your fellow serfs cultivate small joys, a joke shared while sowing seeds, a family prayer at night thanking the emperor for protection, thin comfort though it is. When a baby is born in the village, it's a rare moment of celebration, tinged with fear. What future do they have? The community is tight-knit because only together can you deal with raider aftermath or convince the steward to give a tiny extra ration in winter. When war arrives, sometimes war isn't just passing raiders, it engulfs the whole world. Perhaps a rebel militia or a chaos incursion turns your breadbasket into a battlefield. You might find yourself conscripted on the spot. A PDF officer thrusts a rusty las gun in your hands and says, "Defend that ridge." Suddenly, unarmored and untrained, you're facing actual soldiers or demons. Most of you die in such scrappy last stands. If you somehow survive and the Imperium wins, you'll just be sent back to tilling the blasted soil. You'll mourn those who were fodder and carry on. The war but another catastrophe in a life full of them. Sometimes, if your world's strategic value is high, the Guard or even Astartes might fight to defend it. You got to witness Space Marines once. A small detachment arrived to thwart a massive orc incursion. It was awe-inspiring. Giants in blue ceramite striding through your cornfields, bolters barking. In one afternoon, the orcs were smashed. One Marine even nodded at you in passing. The closest thing to thanks you ever got for ducking and staying out of their line of fire. After they left, the tithe bureaucrats still penalized your district for the damaged crops the Marines inadvertently caused. Such is life. No glory, only grain. There are no songs for nameless agri-serfs who break their bodies to feed distant hives. At best, a passing confessor might bless you all for nourishing the Emperor's faithful with your labor. That spiritual pat on the head is about it. But in quieter moments, you feel a stubborn pride. Your wheat might become the rations of heroes at the front. Your labor keeps billions alive. It's a faint light, but enough to get you up at dawn the next day to hitch the groks to the plow once more. You've made peace that you'll likely die as unremarkably as you lived, perhaps cut down by a raid, or coughing out your last breath in the same fields you've worked since childhood. You just pray your death isn't in vain, that at least your village or family will see another sunrise because of it. Until then, you keep your head down and your scythe swinging under an uncaring sky on a world that sees you as just another tool. It's a hard, unlovely life, but it's the only one you've got, and you endure it with the quiet strength of the truly downtrodden, who nonetheless keep the Imperium's wheel turning, harvest after thankless harvest. Hive Tithe Counter, Imperial Tax Clerk. High in the administratum spire of the Hive, In an office cluttered with ledger scrolls and ticking cogitators, you tally the output of billions and turn lives into numbers. As a hive tithe counter, a mid-level administratum adept, your job is to calculate and extract the planet's due tithe for the Imperium. You are the fulcrum between impossible demands from above and immiserated masses below. When the figures don't add up, and they never quite do, someone will suffer. Perhaps you at the hands of your superiors, or the hive populace at the hands of new tax levies. You shuffle parchment all day under buzzing lumen strips with the weight of an entire hive's resentment on your shoulders. By the numbers, the Imperium runs on paperwork and you generate a lot of it. You compile production reports from manufactoria, population census data from habitation blocks, resource extraction logs from guilders, all to determine how much this hive owes in materiel, food, and manpower to the God Emperor this cycle. The required quotas, set by distant bureaucrats who've never stepped foot here, are astronomically high. Surprise, the hive is short of them. It's always short. So begins your nightmare task. Squeeze more from a stone. Your day might start with reviewing the previous quarter's output. Say 90% of the Prometheum quota met, 85% of the conscript levy filled. Not good enough. You cross-check which HAB zones underproduced or under-enlisted. Then you dictate new edicts. Raise the manufactorum shift hours by 2 in mid-hive factorum district. Impose a surtax on underhive sustenance rations to spur enlistment. Hunger is a great recruiter. You hate signing these orders. You know they mean more misery. But what choice? The High Administrat needed those numbers yesterday. If the shortfall isn't corrected, your planetary governor might be sanctioned, and he'll certainly pass that punishment down to nobodies like you. Between Vox and Vengeful, your role is precariously between the higher-ups and the masses. The planetary governor's office breathes down your neck for projections. You must present that the tithe will be met, no matter what. You massage the numbers, use optimistic yield forecasts, maybe reclassify a few thousand deaths as missing, so population looks higher for levy count. These small bureaucratic lies might save you from your boss's wrath now, but if discovered later, it's your head. You tell yourself it'll work out. Maybe a better harvest or a new off-world trade can actually cover the gap, making your little data fudges true retroactively. It's a dangerous game of adjusting reality to appease distant masters. Meanwhile, downhive, people are rioting because of that new surtax you implemented. Last week, a mob stormed a local administratum sub-office and lynched a minor clerk. You heard the news and broke into a sweat at your desk. There but for the grace of the Emperor go I. You requested enforcer patrols increase around your hab and workplace. Still, every day going home, which is just a tiny hab cell in the administratum quarter, you're not rich or powerful, just educated and unfortunate. You feel eyes on you. People see your quill stylus and ledger case and know that bastard in the robe is one of those raising our work quotas and rents. You've been spat at. You started wearing a drab overcloak to hide your clerk insignia after hours. Guilt and pressure. Perhaps you were idealistic once, wanting to ensure fair taxation and efficient resource use for the good of the Imperium. That idealism got battered quickly. You see how arbitrary and merciless the system is. When a hive sector suffers a plague or war and output drops, the Imperium doesn't ease the tithe. It demands you make up the difference anyway. So you break human beings to hit unrealistic goals. You sign orders that you know will cause starvation or desperation, crimes or indenture of entire families to meet manpower quotas. It wears on your conscience. Each quarter, you watch conditions worsen as more is extracted. Maybe you quietly tried to advise a superior that if we lower the tithe target slightly, the hive could recover and produce more long-term. You were shut down, perhaps threatened with accusation of impeding the Emperor's will. The Administratum doesn't think in long-term for planetary populations, only in immediate compliance. So you've learned to bury compassion under figures. They become just entries in a ledger, faceless. If you dwell on the human cost, the extra 1,000 workers conscripted, which you know means many families without earners, which means more beggars or crime, you'd go mad or sink into despair. Some peers take to drinking low or obscura to cope. Not you, not yet. But each time you sign a punitive tax decree, knowing full well it'll ignite unrest, a little part of your soul withers. No way out. You daydream sometimes, just running away into the hive underlevels, leaving the desk behind. But who are you kidding? You're hive-born middle class. You wouldn't last a week down there with no survival skills or allies. And the Administratum hunts defectors fiercely. They'd brand you heretic for abandoning duty. So you feel stuck in a high-stress job that might literally get you executed either by your own superiors or angry citizens. It pays decently, but not extravagantly. Much of your income you spend on private enforcer guards for contentious announcements, or on medical chems for your stress ulcers. What drives you is often just fear. Fear of punishment if targets are missed. Fear of being torn apart by a mob if you go too far achieving them. Tiny triumphs, endless toil. Rarely, you do manage a win-win. E.g., you discover a misallocated food depot that, when properly accounted, met a grain shortfall without extra burden on the populace. Those days you feel like a hero of bureaucracy. You solved a puzzle and spared people pain. But such instances are few and usually overshadowed by new crises. The Imperium's demands only grow. Next cycle's tithe is always higher. They assume growth or they need more troops for the next war. So your job gets harder over time until something breaks. Maybe the hive rebels or collapses, or you get executed for failure. It's not like you get promoted out of this pressure cooker easily. There's 1,000 scribes as capable vying for limited higher posts, and you're too valuable where you are, for now. So each day you steel yourself at dawn, don the Administratum robes and servo-skull-assisted data slate, and go to your desk to wrestle numbers and souls to serve the Imperial machine. You force down any moral quibbles and do the grim math that turns living people into tithe quantities. In the grand scale, if you fudge or fail, maybe a regiment at the front won't get ammo and fall to Xenos, or a forge world won't get food and fall idle. You tell yourself that to rationalize the suffering you cause locally. It's all for the greater good of mankind's survival. Many days that rings hollow, but you press on because what else can you do? It is, in a twisted way, an honor that the fate of a hive hinges on your spreadsheets, and a horror as well. At shift's end, you might pray quietly in the cubicle shrine. Emperor, guide my hand to do what's necessary. Then you go home under guard, try to sleep over the distant noise of another food riot you indirectly caused, and prepare to do it again tomorrow. In this dark future, even the pen pushers bleed. If not in body, certainly in mind and conscience, one calculation at a time. Gellar Field Maintenance Tech. Warp Shield Ritual Servant. A warp-capable void ship is protected during warp travel by the Holy Gellar Field, a globe of reality that keeps the Imperial nightmares at bay. Deep in the bowels of the ship, where the air crackles with strange energies, lies the Gellar Field Generator. As a Gellar Field maintenance tech, you're one of the unlucky few who gets close to this arcane machinery. Your job? Perform the rites and repairs that keep the field stable between warp jumps. It's mostly routine engineering, except when it isn't. And a slight miscalibration can mean a horror slipping through and introducing itself to you personally. Rituals in the glow. The generator is a massive, humming construct etched with wards and inscribed with unearthly script by the Mechanicus. When the ship is in real space, the field is offline and safe-ish to approach. That's when you perform maintenance, crawling under plasma coils to scrape off weird residue, frosty slime or scorch marks, traces of warp things testing the field's strength, re-sanctifying cracked insulator plates with sacred unguents, tightening bolts while quietly reciting the litany of containment. It's finicky, ritualistic work. You're essentially part mechanic, part acolyte. Every switch you flip or circuit you replace must be accompanied by the proper prayer. You don't know if it's truly necessary, but you've seen what happens when steps are skipped. Nothing usually, but you're not willing to chance it. Perhaps one time a junior tech didn't burn incense before reactivating a field relay. That next warp jump, the field flickered, just for half a heartbeat, but that was enough for a maddening whisper to echo through the lower decks and a half-formed horror to claw at reality. The field held, barely, and once translated out of warp, we found the junior tech babbling, his mind gone. Coincidence? The veteran techs say no. Every right matters. Brushing the warp. The worst part is when you have to do emergency fixes during a warp transit. Most times you stay the hell away from the Gellar generator when the ship is in the Imperium. It's on, doing its sacred duty, and the area around it hums with barely restrained unreality. But if a component overloads mid-voyage, someone must venture in to replace it right then. That someone is you or a crewmate, donned in a void suit for safety. You tether off and step into the chamber as alarms blare and weird lights dance on the bulkheads. I did this once. A coupling blew out and we lost partial field strength on the port quarter. I waded into a miasma of sparks and warp static to swap in a fresh conduit. In those 3 minutes, I felt things. The air got heavy, pressure on my chest. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a silhouette that shouldn't have been there, like a tall man made of shadow standing just beyond the field coils, watching. I didn't investigate. I value my soul. I just completed the task with shaking hands, chanting the Emperor's name. When full field power was restored, the presence was gone. I reported nothing unusual. I don't fancy an Inquisitor poking into my delusions. We maintenance techs have an unspoken pact. If you see or hear something during warp ops, you keep it to yourself unless it's an immediate threat. We each suspect the others have had their own brushes with the beyond. We occasionally exchange knowing glances that say, "The things I've seen," and then we get back to work. Living on a knife's edge. If the Gellar field ever fails completely while in warp, everyone dies, or worse. That knowledge is a constant weight on you. You trust the machine spirit and the Mechanicus craftsmanship, but accidents and enemy action are real. You've seen minor field flickers and their effects. Paint peeling in hallways as if something tried to claw through, crewmen suffering nightmares or nosebleeds en masse. So you work with fanatic diligence. A miswired circuit isn't just a workplace oops. It's potentially a death sentence for thousands and an open door to hellish intruders. This pressure and near isolation, the field generator is in a sealed section few others enter, binds your small team tightly. You eat together, bunk near each other. Jokes are dark. If we screw up, at least it'll be quick. Not necessarily true. Warp entities can make death very slow. But humor keeps us sane. We also find a strange comfort in the hum of the generator. Its thrum is the sound of safety. Many of us sleep best right next to the field core. Others think it's creepy, but to us, it's like a lullaby beating back the void. When it shuts down for maintenance, the silence is loud. You feel suddenly exposed. We often do our post-jump work with urgency just to get it powered on again, restoring that reassuring vibration. Unlauded, essential. Like many lowly roles, no one thanks the Gellar techs when a warp voyage is smooth. It's taken for granted. But let there be the slightest warp disturbance, and guess who gets scowled at by the captain and prayed over by half the crew? We do. It's ironic. They barely acknowledge our existence until something goes wrong. Then all eyes turn to us with desperation. We're like the ship's scapegoats and saviors rolled into one. That's okay. We don't do this for glory. There is none. We do it because someone must hold the line, however invisibly, between reality and the screaming madness just beyond the hull. In the grand void, every crew member relies on the Emperor's protection, but we're the ones down in the engine guts making sure that protection stays lit. So you'll find me after a successful warp jump in the generator chamber, wiping sweat from my brow and sacred grease off my gloves, whispering a prayer of thanks to the God Emperor and the ominous sire that once again the field held. Another journey safely traversed, largely unnoticed by those above decks. And that's fine. In the horror of 40K, a quiet shift where nothing noticeably horrific happened is the best outcome one can hope for. From the depths of the hives to the bowels of void ships, these nameless billions endure the unendurable so that the Imperium survives. They get no medals or triumphs, only more toil, more terror. Yet, through their uncelebrated suffering, planets prosper, armies march, and humanity's light fends off the darkness for one more day. In a universe of unending war and horror, even the lowliest laborer's duty matters. They bear the worst jobs imaginable, with stoic faith that, though their bodies ache and their lives are cheap, their work helps sustain the last glimmer of civilization. It is a cruel fate, but in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only service, and they serve without thanks, until death finally brings the peace their daily existence never could.